What's up everybody, it's Izzy, and in this video I want to talk about quad training for raw lifters. So in my last video where I kind of just ranted a bit about good morning squats, I think I accidentally gave people the impression that I'm against quad training for raw lifting, and that couldn't be further from the truth. The main point that I wanted to make in my last video is that you don't necessarily need to squat upright as a powerlifter. It's not a form error to be relatively bent over. Okay, the reason why Olympic lifters are so upright when they squat is because this mimics the position that they'll need to be in to properly catch a clean or a snatch. In order for them to squat that upright, and if you look at an Olympic lifter from the side while they're squatting, you'll notice that their knees travel way out over their toes. There's a ton of forward knee travel, which allows them to remain upright because, they don't have to have their hips travel backward as much in order to keep the bar over midfoot. Now, in order to squat like this, you need an absolute surplus of quad strength because you're shifting so much of the leverage to the quads, right? The torque that needs to be overcome by the knees is much greater as your knees keep traveling further and further out over your toes. In powerlifting, again, this is just not necessary. You don't get any style points for doing this, and the only reason is because you want someone to think your form is aesthetic, but it may not be the best way to lift the most weight. Now, with all that said, I am definitely not against training the quads. The quads are one of the prime movers in the back squat, and of course, they should be addressed and kept moving up along with the rest of the chain. And what we do know is that for some people, back squats, and even particular low bar back squats, are not always the best builder of the quads. It doesn't mean, of course, that they don't do anything for the quads because your knees have to extend somehow. That said, yeah, there are exercises that probably target the quads better. So I want to talk about some of the options that people frequently use and kind of weigh in on them. So one of the more common ones is to do high bar squats or safety bar squats in Olympic lifting shoes, possibly using a closer stance. And this is really good because it's very specific, right? It's very close to your normal low bar squat. The problem with this can become if somebody is very hip dominant when they squat, when you have the bar in a high bar position or even safety bar squats, you can still allow your hips to shoot back and kind of take over the movement. So if you go too heavy on this movement, it basically just ends up reinforcing the movement pattern that you're hopefully trying to correct, or at least the muscular weakness that you're trying to address. So kind of the next common thing that people will reach for are front squats. And front squats are great and terrible at the same time depending on the person. So front squats tend to work better than high bar, close stance high bar squats for purely getting after the quads because you almost can't have your hips shoot back too much. And this is because, of course, in a front squat, you have the bar racked in front of you, and if your hips go back too much and your back angle becomes too leaned over, the bar simply falls off of your shoulders or it crushes your wrists and other bad things happen, right? So you have to some degree, stay upright when you front squat. Now, there are also problems with front squats, though. Even though this is a specific quad movement, it's a squat with the bar, front squats have a lot of problems with people not being able to do them properly. So like other versions of Olympic squats, front squats require you to stay very upright. It's part of why we're using them. But part of that requirement is that you have really good ankle dorsiflexion. And this is why, say 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago, old school Olympic lifting shoes had an effective heel height of 1.5 inches rather than what's more common today at like 3/4 of an inch. And this is because the added heel height helped to make up for some of the lack of dorsiflexion that is present in certain lifters. So for certain lifters who don't have good ankle dorsiflexion, this movement is going to be a no-go. And another potential problem is with the front rack, right? Some people don't have the mobility in their shoulders, lats, or their wrists to hold the bar in a good front rack. And people often get around this by using the California grip, the cross arm grip, bodybuilder style grip, straps on the bar, front squat harnesses, whatever, and that's fine as long as it still forces you to stay upright like a normal front squat would. Again, though, even with all of these things considered, let's think about somebody who might potentially have quad problems in their squat. It might be the person that we were just talking about in that last video. They've got long legs and a short torso, and let's say you get a long-legged, short torsoed person who has poor dorsiflexion. This person is not going to be able to perform front squats with good technique. It's just going to be a struggle for them, and they probably won't be able to handle weights that are actually high enough to have any realistically good carryover to their back squat. And again, that's another issue with front squats, is that you need to train them for a relatively long time before you start to get anything out of them. It's not that uncommon for someone to only be able to front squat 50 to 60% of their back squat when they first start doing the movement. It's a long-term investment that takes a while to pay dividends. Overall though, if you're someone that does have the body type and the ankle mobility to perform front squats, they're a great way to complement low bar squats because it's almost the opposite movement pattern. You're forced to stay upright rather than, say, being kind of allowed to take advantage of leaning over more, which is what you do in a low bar squat. Now, the last leg training tool that I want to talk about is actually the leg press. And I know that may be surprising to some of you, but I think that the leg press is a great way to train the quads. Now, there is some problems with it, right? The first problem, of course, is that it's not as specific as the other two that we just mentioned. The further you get away from the main movement in terms of specificity, you might run into issues getting good carryover. The other problem with leg press is that it's just annoying to load enough weight, especially as you get strong. Putting on, 10 plates per side is a pain in the ass. It really is. So one of the ways that you can get around that is to use resistance bands on the leg press, or you can do, one thing that I like to do is just do single leg presses. And this allows you to go a bit deeper than a traditional leg press, and you don't have to load quite as much weight in order to get a good training effect. Anyways, guys, that's kind of my thoughts on quad training for raw lifters. So again, to kind of summarize for you, the main point that I wanted to make in that last video about good morning squats was not that you should never train your squat or that you should never train your quads as a raw lifter. In fact, I think it's just the opposite. Almost any good intermediate and advanced program is going to include some type of quad focused movement, and whether that's front squats, high bar squats with a closed stance, leg press, is kind of going to depend on the individual lifter and whatever that they need at that time. Also depends on how far away you are from a meet, right? So again, I definitely do not think that you need to skip out on the quad training if you're a raw lifter. Do some type of quad training, definitely. Everybody should be doing something. However, my big point was you don't necessarily need to be bolt upright to be considered having good squat form in powerlifting. You don't need to catch snatches and cleans in an upright position, so there's no reason for you to need to be as upright as an Olympic lifter if you are a power lifter. And it's somewhat of a pet peeve of mine because one thing that you'll often see is people who are just simply trying to squat too upright, and then with a heavy enough weight, the weight kind of throws them forward into a better low bar position, and then they say, hey, how do I fix good morning squat? Well, you should fix it by trying to actually assume a position that's realistic to maintain. It's no different than when people try to set up with their hips ultra low on a conventional deadlift, and then when the weight gets heavy, the hips just shoot up anyway. You can't force your body to assume a position that it's simply not strong in. So stop trying to do that. That was the point that I wanted to make in this video and the last video combined. You don't necessarily need to be upright to be a good squatter. And at the same time, still train your quads. They're one of the prime movers in the back squat. Anyways, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. As always, my friends, have a nice day and good luck in your training. Peace.